All right. What's going on, everybody? If you guys are here, let me know. Go ahead, say hi in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button and we'll get going. I know there's probably some people that'll be joining us in a bit. Got quite a bit of stuff to talk about. We had some earnings this last couple days. We got some coming up. In particular, for after hours today, we've got App, we've got Cisco, QuantumScape. Got some coming up the rest of the week too. The big one for tomorrow would probably be Coinbase, Applied Materials, and on Friday we got Moderna. Oh, let me put this up for you guys. The big ones to talk about from this last week, I'd probably say Coca-Cola is looking like it's staying pretty strong. Spotify reported. Robinhood and LYFT were big ones, and Cloudflare. And then this morning we had Shopify and Unity that had some pretty big moves, and we'll discuss them in a little bit. And then of course after hours today we got AppLovin. I think Cisco is probably the other one that you guys are probably interested in. And maybe even QuantumScape if you guys have any stake in that. But let's peek over at our flow. I know we still got about half an hour, but we are seeing quite a bit of flow come in. IWM looking kind of strong. CoreWeave just had something. Gold. What I will point out is the flow scanner today picked up quite a bit of puts on SPY and quite a bit of calls on gold. So we might be seeing a little bit of that flight to safety again. You know, we've talked about this before. There are times where we see the money moving away from indices, moving away from the broader market, and headed toward gold. I don't see silver on here till way further down over here. Only $2 million of calls being taken. But yeah, let's take a look at what we see. Take a look at our charts as well too. To start off with, SPY had quite a bit of put flow earlier in the day. It's kind of come right back down for now, so it's not too bad. Still about $12 million of puts to about $38 million of calls being sold off. Again, the indices are near all-time highs. Okay, SPY is pretty close to all-time highs. Let me show you guys that. SPY is pretty close to all-time highs. We're from the top, not even a whole percent down. So we keep going toward it. And we've seen a few different sell-offs here and there, but realistically, you have to understand there's liquidity that's being pumped into the markets. They are still buying back mortgage-backed securities. Another $2 billion was actually bought $2 billion was bought just the other day. So they still are injecting bits of liquidity. Like we said, once we hit 2026, they were going to stop the quantitative tightening, meaning pulling money out of the system. And they've headed into quantitative easing, but not exactly calling it that. And that's why we're seeing markets stay near the top. But you have to understand too, while the S&P 500 has stayed very close to, in terms of SPX 7,000, SPY is right below 7, down from all-time highs. So for example, Meta, if you take it from the top, Meta's down 15%. That's actually not too bad. Google's one of the better ones. Google's only down and still doing pretty well this year, down 10% from the highs. Apple made kind of a comeback, but was as far down as about 14-15%. Right now, only 4% from the top, which is looking pretty good. One of the big things about Apple is they were always behind on the AI trade. They really haven't been doing much to develop their AI, and ultimately that's actually proven to be good for them because they don't have as big of a CapEx expenditure. They're not as invested in other names. We'll pick out Microsoft in a moment. Let's do that. Microsoft is the one that's hurting pretty bad, but a lot of this actually has to do with the fact that they have a pretty large stake in OpenAI. And we're starting to see some cracks in the OpenAI trade. Again, I keep reiterating this. They have $1.4 trillion of spend commitments over the next 5 years. And they just reported, last year they made, I think, $14 billion. They just reported a $14 billion loss so far for this last year. So, Microsoft has a pretty decent stake in it. They're down 27%. The big question is, do we see this continue to sell off? They did just fill this gap. They are at a pretty decent trend line. I wouldn't be surprised to see this bounce a little bit. Maybe come back up before it heads further down. But, something's got to be done for this name. They're getting wrecked right now because of it. NVIDIA, I've been saying, looks like it's going through distribution, but very possibly could make one more push to the upside. I know that Michael Burry's been heavy in this, saying that NVIDIA and Palantir are headed down. A lot of it has to do with the fact that, for example, NVIDIA was the leader in the chip space for quite some time. But as the AI trade progressed, there was, a lot of other companies started to develop their own chips, started to develop competitors that were, maybe not as high end as NVIDIA chips are, but they're starting to cut into that profit margin, cut into the moat that NVIDIA had. So realistically, if NVIDIA does report that, the demand for their chips has gone down, or they're not able to price it as high as they used to, if they have any sort of surplus that they can't get off their hands, I definitely think this trade might start to go down below this 170 mark. But it's had a few drops. There is still one possibility. We could see NVIDIA make one more all-time high, before it heads further down. Tesla, interesting on Tesla right now. We are seeing Tesla, there is this downtrend that it just peaked up above. You could argue right now that's retesting that downtrend, retesting that breakout. But you could even say, with the after hours as well, it's right below it. So if you go off of just the daily, though, there is a small breakout that could potentially lead into more gains to come for Tesla. Netflix stuck with this Warner Brothers acquisition fight between Paramount. We'll see what ends up happening. There is something where if Warner Brothers backs out of the Netflix side of things, that they will pay out Netflix. I believe it was $2.8 billion if they back out of it and go with Paramount instead. We're going to have to see. I also saw something about how Netflix is like 90% chance that they're going to raise their subscription price this year. So we'll see what's going on with that. The big thing with today is that we're seeing a lot of software as a service. We're seeing a lot of SaaS names go down. Adobe dropping even further. Firm down 5%. C3 AI down 7%. AMD is holding up. We'll see if it ends up filling this gap above and if it comes back down. But this has hints of what's going on with NVIDIA as well. AMD, definitely had a decent pop right before last earnings, but came right back down during this earnings. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Coinbase down another 6% today. They do report tomorrow after hours. We'll take a look at what the flow says. This Bitcoin's been struggling, right? We saw what happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin dropped to back there. Bitcoin dropped to about 60K just earlier last week, and came back up, but it's coming back down again. 67K. I've been, if you guys have been following me, I've been showing you guys that there's this cycle that happened with Bitcoin back in 2021, 2022. And if you overlay that to where we are right now, it seems very possible that we will head a little bit further down, head down toward about 50K if maybe. there is a possibility right in like the 45 to 50K range that we might see Bitcoin come down to. So I know there's a lot of Bitcoin bulls out there, but this is just a regular cycle that we've seen happen from before as well. So we're right about here, back what we saw during May of 2022. With that being said, let's jump into our stacks. Second here. All right. As we get closer to the close, let's talk a little bit about what our upcoming earnings are. So we got AppLovin coming up after hours. I will say it looks kind of bearish, to be honest. And again, it's another software as a service type company. It's dropped a little bit today, but I would definitely be leaning toward the bearish side of it. I mean, the charts, I will say the charts are already kind of far down there. All right, we're seeing app drop, but you know, there is room for it to come back down. PE ratio fairly high. I mean, they've got a decent chance at beating earnings. At least the most recent earnings have all been green. Possible to see though, we do have a lot of names recently that I've seen earnings beats and still sell off. Okay, the most recent candles here are also kind of rough. You have kind of a doji star candle right around that 475 and broke down here. So again, it's possible that we might see AppLovin continue with the SaaS sell-off. It did just fill this recent gap. There is a small gap below. So possible that it comes down toward like 400. It might be a decent drop. We'll see. In terms of what STAX shows here, we really just see calls being sold off the last few days. Okay. The puts side, yeah, there are some puts being taken. Fairly small in terms of premium. But there is quite some bearishness, at least this last month, for AppLovin. CSCO has been fairly strong overall compared to the rest of the market. So CSCO for this year is still up already like 10 to 15%. So if I go to January 2nd, what, up 10, maybe 15% if you went to the highs. CSCO's holding up pretty strong. I mean, they've got a solid service in terms of what they offer, their telecommunications equipment. PE ratio out of 32. There's still room to go up with this. I'm expecting an earnings beat. They're a strong company. You can see over the years, even through COVID and everything, they were still beating earnings. They are, you can consider during this AI run up, AI bubble, whatever you call it, they're one of the shovels. They're one of the important shovels that are necessary for this gold rush, you might imagine. But it is, I will say, it's near the upper bound of it. We could see one more push up. CSCO, in terms of stacks, though, we do see quite a few calls being sold off. And nothing quite, we don't see them getting into any new positions right now. We do have some calls and some puts being bought, the shorter term one being put. So, I would say there is possible that they still be earnings and we'll see a little bit of a sell-off. I wouldn't expect anything huge, but it's one of those names that, again, they're important for this AI trade, right? They're definitely important for this AI trade. The other one, let's see, QuantumScape. 'Scape. If very, very small in terms of premium. 80K in puts, $347,000 of calls sold off. And that's really, we're just seeing calls being sold off. The markets kind of ran into a few bits of uncertainty, right? A little bit of selling off recently, mostly due to the fact that there are questions of whether or not this new Fed chair is actually going to be, put in place. There was a video of President Trump talking about how he thinks he made a mistake because he's not necessarily willing to cut interest rates just yet. But we also need to understand too, unemployment. We had unemployment numbers come in, right? Or jobs numbers, not unemployment. We had job numbers come in where it was said that the U.S. economy added 130,000 jobs in January. Expectations were only 55,000. Okay, that means unemployment rate actually fell. Expectation was supposed to be 4.4%, fell down to 4.3. So it's a stronger jobs report than expected. But what that also leads into is the fact that there's a higher probability that we're going to pause on rate cuts. And I know, right now it's been all over the news. The president wants us to cut rates, wants lower rates so that they can refinance the debt at a better rate, pay less on the interest. Lower rates also stimulates the economy, helps bring down that job unemployment number, helps. But what will also happen is it'll lead into more inflation. So, U.S. jobs report, non-farm payrolls, definitely higher unemployment rate, a little bit lower than expected. A lot of it was private payrolls. We did lose a lot of government jobs. I think right now it's like government jobs are almost at an all-time low. But ultimately, that they're saying that the private sector has been hiring. I don't know about you. I'm a little bit skeptical on my end for it, just because again, there's some factors at play, right? They want to lower these interest rates. So actually having higher unemployment could be a reason to do that. Having lower inflation would be beneficial in this situation, because if we do lower rates, inflation would very likely start to come back. And so there's some conflicting ideas here, where the new Fed chair is known to be a hawk, meaning that he generally does not want to lower interest rates, but will do so if his hand is forced, if the economy is doing so poorly that that's the best case scenario, or the best course of action. So there is a belief that his hand will be forced, that there will be lower interest rates eventually. But keep in mind, being that the Fed chair, the head of it, is only a part of the equation. Like, the rest of the members still need to vote as to what they want to do. Okay. One thing I do want to point out, this really stuck out to me today, was Broadcom. Broadcom, Wave X showing for just today in terms of it. Flow is a little bit more, everything's being sold off. But look at this here, guys. For March, so just about a month from now, the expected move from where we're at, the 341, they're buying 340. But somebody out there is expecting Broadcom to drop. And look, 560K, 560K. So, if I just do this, I could say equals for just today. $16 million of puts being taken out against Broadcom. Okay. So, just something to consider. There's some out of the money ones here. The ones that they bought are fairly expensive, 2K per contract. But could it mean that we're going to see Broadcom take a bit of a drop? Here's the thing too. Broadcom has this head and shoulders pattern that it popped back up above, but if it does break down again, generally you go head to the shoulder or to the neckline and could see a pretty ugly drop off. They report on the 4th of March, while these are being bought for the 6th of March. So maybe we might see a little bit of a sell-off for Broadcom as we head down toward those toward the earnings coming up next month. Okay. But yeah, just something very interesting that came up. Just you don't necessarily see just so many coming in all at once, and when you do, it usually, you know, your ears should perk up. So take a look at to see if we see any unusual situations, especially as we come in. Oh, let's talk about that too. Shopify. We saw Shopify report earnings this morning. And here's the thing. It actually popped overnight. Shopify reported earnings popped overnight. Right at the open, it sold off heavy. Okay. So you saw from yesterday, there we go. From yesterday, overnight had a 13% pop to the upside. But from that top, it now sold off 25%. The $30 swing from the open. Okay. So markets opened at about what, 140 or so. Yeah. And we saw Shopify go from a plus 14% down as much as 20% down. It was a $30 swing. Okay. I've been telling you guys, this earnings cycle has been something that you have to be very, very careful with. A lot of overnight moves have not necessarily held. And, you know, even if it drops, it could come back. If it goes up significantly, it could sell off just like this, you know, by the open or even overnight. So that's where it's very, very risky to be in options and swinging them for earnings right now. Okay. Another one that we can talk about is Robinhood. Robinhood actually had a decent report. They missed their revenue just slightly. Beat their EPS by about 4, almost 5%. But saw a decent sell-off overnight. Okay. They are kind of creating a range. I said yesterday during my live stream that it's looking like they're creating a little bit of a range to chop around in for a little bit, and that the probability was more likely to the downside. And we did see what they're down 9% today, with even a little bit more through the day, up to 15% overnight. LYFT is the other one. LYFT was a very interesting drop. Okay. LYFT actually beat their EPS by 5,500%, 5,400%. But they missed their revenue by about 8 or 9%. So they had a pretty decent sell-off here. They basically said the winter weather was, you know, cutting into their earnings a little bit. But I would say LYFT, I'm still confident down the line we'll see LYFT trading much higher. This could be an opportunity for a shakeout where we could definitely see it start to come back. But it's hurting, down 16% for today for LYFT. What else? Cloudflare. Man. Great earnings report. Popped overnight. And like I said again, sold off pretty heavy. So popped 15% overnight. By the morning was already, by the morning it was still up. It's still up 5% for today. But a big part of it's getting sold off. Okay. So As much as earnings can be fun, we've always said earnings can be a little bit of a gamble. You got to be careful with it. You know, don't be surprised if it goes one way overnight and then comes back the other during the day or by open. We do have a couple names. Let me just go through them before we got about 5 minutes. But Thursday we got NBIS that reports. I guess my projections were a little bit higher than expected, but kind of making this move. I still think it has a possibility to come down and fill the rest of this gap before we see the move. Do we see anything for STAX on this? Awesome. Saw some prints come in today. Some calls being sold off. One thing of buys for $100 calls for March. About a 10% move to the upside. I would come back to this tomorrow to see if anything. Or actually, no. That's going to be reporting in the morning. PG&E. Slightly more bullish, but fairly small premium. Most recent prints have all been calls for it. In the energy sector, so I think it definitely could have an upward move. How much of it's priced in, we'll see. Yeah, been doing pretty strong. It's looking like an inverse head and shoulders pattern. We definitely could see this break to the upside. I know a lot of you guys have been asking about Coinbase. Touched on it just a little bit earlier. It's very heavily oversold. It's at a range where we tend to see decent bounces from this range. Okay, I drew this, you know, a week or two ago. It's still being sold off though. But I mean, let's look at this. The stochastic indicator shows it's at like it's under a 5. And generally when we see it that low, that's where we start to see it get bought up. There's also a fear and greed indicator for crypto that shows it's in extreme fear. So, you know, there's a lot of question marks here with crypto. You know, we still have that Clarity Act that still is in progress. It's hard to say what exactly is going to happen with it just now. Okay, but in terms of greed and fear, in terms of oversold, Coinbase, I would say if they've got decent earnings, I wouldn't be surprised to see this bounce back up toward, from this 150 range. We definitely could see back up at 170, 180, if not close to 200 in terms of a strong bounce. Grab has earnings that come up today after hours as well. I'm still bullish on this name overall. I'm thinking we should see a pretty strong report. The overlay I have here is when Palantir was in the same accumulation zone, had this giant sell-off to a buy-up and a shakeout before earnings popped and had Palantir, jump pretty high. So Grab has that possibility. Obviously, it doesn't have to go exactly alongside with it, but it's just the pattern that we've seen. And if earnings does end up being a nice beat for this name, I think we could definitely see it go higher. It is in the oversold territory as well, and that's where we, again, we start to see it move up. Interesting thing about Grab too is that all of the STAX buys have all been very, very positive, but we do have a couple of puts that just came in before close today, aiming for below $4. Very small premiums though, 31K. This one 287 came in a little bit earlier today. Decent volume on that though. So I mean, IV is extremely high. It's definitely got to push it down below 4. But it's one of those names where I believe it's going to get bought up at those levels. All right, let's put up my okay, so we got AppLovin, we got CSCO, got QuantumScape. Let's put up Grab as well. I don't know if Grab reports right at close though, because they're a overseas company. We've got it on the 15-second. They should all be after hours, so we'll see how these move. If you're still here watching, go ahead, say hi in the chat. I know you're here. As always, I gotta ask you guys, hit that thumbs up button. Helps me out in terms of the YouTube algorithm. Generally for TradingView, these are the estimate of when they're going to be reporting. So Cisco at the 5-minute mark, QuantumScape probably at the 15. See if Grab already reported yet. I don't see anything just yet, but it's up slightly. Oh, AppLovin. A little bit of a push, but I'm gonna see if I find any. If I find anything on Twitter just yet. And oh, big push up, big push down. AppLovin's up about 5% so far. But it definitely just went both ways. And I don't know about this candle just yet. back and forth. Let me see what I found on. Okay, so they beat revenue and EPS. Pretty decent beats. Cisco looking like the reaction looks like Cisco beat. Oops. Yeah, Cisco double beat by 2%. Yeah, app beat by 10% on the EPS and 3% on revenue. Nothing on Grab just yet. QuantumScape still waiting on it. App is starting to sell off. App is now down about 1%. Same with Cisco. See what I mean when I said a lot of these, even if these earning reports are good, the expectations, if they're too high, you know, especially you want to think about it this way. Some of these names have an expectation they're supposed to beat, right? They're consistently, you know, beating earnings overall, and as a result, expectations are a bit higher for them. So yeah, AppLovin's down what, 4%? But again, we'll see what happens by morning. See how much of it sells off. Cisco's flat. QuantumScape hasn't really moved just yet. Let me peek over, see if I find anything on Grab. All right, Grab doesn't report till, it says 7 p.m. Eastern time, so that's what, 4 p.m. on the West Coast, so we won't see a report for this for a little bit. QuantumScape reports at the 15. AppLovin now down 7%, right? What did I tell you guys on that one? AppLovin now down 8%. Cisco down 1.5%, almost 2%. Grab's up overnight so far, but again, like I said, we got probably 3 hours till they actually report their earnings. Let's see, was there anything else that we wanted to look at? All the other stuff reports later. Yeah. Ooh, AppLovin still selling, now 10% down. Bisco now down 4%. All right, we'll see what happens with QuantumScape. A few more minutes for that. All right. QuantumScape's up. They report already? Well, that went back and forth. Now QuantumScape is down 0.5%. All right. App 11 down 6%. Cisco down about 4%. QuantumScape's flat. Grab, we're going to come back to that later today to see how that turns out. All right. A reminder this week on the rest of earnings, we got a couple other names coming up. Mainly tomorrow is probably just Coinbase after hours. If you guys are in our Discord live, we'll be watching that at the end of the market close tomorrow. We also got DraftKings, Expedia, Arista Networks, RIVN. So we got some names to look at. All right, guys. As always, if you have any questions, anything that you want to send us, go ahead. help@investorcentralclub.com. I know we've got our upcoming back testing for STAX AI. I still got to finish up the numbers and the video. Stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so that when that drops, you guys get that. But again, we'll be back on here next Wednesday on YouTube. Otherwise, if you're already in STAX, I'll see you guys in the lives on Discord tomorrow. Have a great rest of your guys' day. Hope you guys are doing well. We'll see you guys in the next one.